Antarctica is the coldest, driest, and most extreme continent on Earth, a massive, unbroken sheet of white. The climate features absolute freezing temperatures and violent, sudden storms. It is a completely isolated wasteland, hostile to any form of human settlement. Look at the 1513 Piri Reis map, compiled by an Ottoman admiral. It illustrates parts of the globe supposedly unknown at the time. Along the southern edge, a landmass closely resembles Antarctica, but there's a massive discrepancy. The terrain is drawn completely free of ice. That single detail fueled decades of speculation about an ancient, highly advanced civilization. They believed these ancient mariners navigated and charted the southern pole long before modern ships broke through the ice. Historians firmly reject that claim, pointing out that the map contains significant geographical errors. There is absolutely zero physical evidence of an ancient seafaring empire operating in the Deep South. So, while the 1513 map is likely a combination of borrowed charts and creative guesswork, it forces us to ask a profound question. Did this frozen desert actually hold a green, thriving ecosystem in the past? And if so, how do you map a world buried beneath 2 miles of solid ice? To find out what actually lies below the frost, researchers had to abandon historical parchment and take to the sky. This diagram illustrates a technique called subglacial radar scanning. Aircraft fly over the flat white surface, sending radar waves deep into the ice sheet to measure exactly how long it takes for the signals to bounce off the bedrock below. The data returning to the sensors revealed an enormous, untouched landscape. It is a massive stretch of terrain that has been preserved in total darkness for over 14 million years. Beneath the miles of solid frost, scientists found sprawling mountain ranges, deep ancient valleys, and complex frozen river systems. This verified subterranean geography is incredibly complex. Yet public attention is often diverted by strange visual anomalies found on the surface. This photograph shows a peak deep within the Ellsworth Mountains. Its 4 steep, triangular faces closely mimic the geometric symmetry of an Egyptian pyramid. Online sleuths quickly argued it was a buried architectural structure. Geologists, however, explained that this is a naturally occurring formation. The sharp, symmetrical faces are the direct result of millions of years of intense freezing and rapid wind erosion. We don't need to invent artificial monuments to make this continent interesting. The very real prehistoric world entombed right beneath the bedrock is already entirely alien to the Antarctica we know today. Seeing the shapes of ancient valleys with radar provides the layout. To prove what actually lived there, scientists had to bore directly into the ice and pull up physical samples. Look at this ice core sample. By extracting these long cylinders from deep underground, researchers can examine distinct layers of trapped sediment. Inside that frozen atmosphere and dark band of dirt, they discovered material that usually only exists in temperate climates: fossilized wood, ancient pollen, and dense rainforest vegetation. These biological remnants were pulled from sites located remarkably close to the geographic South Pole itself. The presence of this specific plant life dictates that the region once featured an active, warm water cycle. It possessed flowing rivers that fed into expansive wetlands and nourished a massive forest canopy. Because every plant species has a specific survival threshold, these fossils act as biological thermometers. By cross-referencing these remains with the growing conditions of their modern relatives, climatologists determined that Antarctica once shared the same mild, temperate climate found across modern-day Europe. This hard biological data proves the modern frozen desert is a relatively recent development in the continent's history, replacing what was once a thriving, complex ecosystem. Today, it remains a harsh, unyielding expanse. Spanning over 5 million square miles, it is the most isolated landmass on Earth. While humans never mapped these lush coastlines in the 16th century, the Earth itself kept a flawless record of its green past inside the ice. The entire continent acts as a planetary time capsule. Locked securely beneath the surface is a continuous, unbroken record of global climate shifts spanning millions of years. Researchers are still actively scanning the bedrock. Enormous swaths of this buried topography remain completely unknown, waiting to be surveyed. In the course of that ongoing mapping, scientists stumbled upon massive underground lakes. These vast bodies of liquid water sit miles below the surface, perfectly sealed away from the outside atmosphere. When probes finally penetrated the dark, freezing waters, they found living microbial ecosystems. Organisms have been surviving and adapting in total isolation for millions of years. Ancient, isolated biology continues to survive in the absolute darkness beneath the ice, representing a living link to a world we are only beginning to map. Look at this physical barrier, a sheer wall of ice stretching for miles. For decades, the scale of this frozen block convinced the world that the continent behind it was a lifeless, impenetrable wasteland. In 1959, global governments signed the Antarctic Treaty. The agreement designated the land as a peaceful scientific zone, but it also legally locked down the continent by placing strict restrictions on military activity and territorial expansion. Because travel is so heavily controlled, vast stretches of this landscape remain completely inaccessible to the public, effectively creating a massive geographic black box. But as researchers push past these restrictions, they are uncovering the opposite of a dead zone. They are finding active, self-contained ecosystems and reporting sensory experiences they cannot explain. Total isolation creates a dual reality. Below the ice, it forces life into bizarre evolutionary paths. Above the ice, it strips away the familiar markers humans need to maintain psychological stability. Nearly 4 kilometers beneath the surface sits Lake Vostok. It is a massive pocket of water that has been entirely sealed off from the Earth's atmosphere for millions of years. This cross-section shows the extreme parameters. 4 kilometers of solid ice create a total darkness barrier, cutting off sunlight and leaving water with almost no oxygen. Despite the massive downward pressure, researchers discovered microbial organisms surviving in the dark. To confirm this, scientists had to set up stations on the surface and drill through kilometers of ice to retrieve samples from the water below. And as massive ice shelves shift, they expose even larger life forms. Researchers are finding giant sea spiders, ancient corals, and octopuses that have survived for centuries in freezing, pitch-black water. These discoveries prove that physical separation doesn't stop life. Instead, it acts as an extreme filter, creating self-sustaining alien ecosystems that operate entirely independently from the rest of the planet. Back on the surface, the McMurver Dry Valleys hold an unsettling visual anomaly. This image shows a deep red liquid bleeding out from the glacier. The verified cause is iron-rich salt water. The liquid flows from beneath the ice and immediately oxidizes, turning red as it hits the surface air. But the terrifying appearance of the falls initially inspired rumors of hidden underground chambers and unknown activity beneath the glacier. This reaction reveals how human nature operates in a vacuum. When placed in an environment devoid of normal context, the mind often mutates a simple biological or chemical reality into folklore. The sheer emptiness and silence of the Antarctic surface aggressively attack the human psyche. These psychological distortions are grounded in documented history. During his journeys, the explorer Ernest Shackleton recorded experiences that even his modern counterparts continue to describe. Pushed to the brink of survival, Shackleton and his men reported the constant feeling of an unseen companion walking beside them in snowstorms, a phenomenon now known as the third man factor. That same mental strain eventually bred legends at sea. Japanese naval crews began reporting encounters with an enormous, pale anomaly they called the Ningen. Witnesses describe a creature with massive size, pale white skin, and human-like facial features that appears briefly before vanishing beneath the ice. While no official evidence proves these entities exist, the profound psychological isolation of Antarctica makes these experiences functionally real to those who report them. Antarctica is a landscape where the limits of biological adaptation and the limits of human imagination collide. On one hand, extreme conditions force microscopic life to survive against impossible odds. On the other, those same conditions force rational humans to perceive shadows and monsters. As long as the continent remains restricted and physically isolated, the line between verified scientific data and supernatural legend will likely stay blurred. These exact geographic unknowns attracted the first secret expeditions during World War II. In the late 1930s, Nazi Germany launched the Schwabenland expedition, marking a shift toward covert operations on the continent. By introducing military secrecy to such an isolated environment, these early incursions provided the framework for the post-war base theories and UFO sightings that define the continent's modern mythology. To most of the world, Antarctica is a blank slate. We picture it as a massive, untouched nature reserve at the bottom of the globe, a pristine, frozen desert dedicated entirely to peaceful scientific research. But that pristine image hides a much heavier, more complex reality. For nearly a century, this supposedly empty continent has been a heavily controlled zone, attracting intense and often highly secretive military operations. If there is really nothing down there but ice and rock, we have to ask why Nazi Germany felt compelled to send dedicated surveying teams to the region in the 1930s, and why the United States military followed up in 1946 by deploying a massive naval armada. Because these mid-century operations were steeped in military classification, the public rarely got the full story. That lack of transparency created a massive information vacuum. And when official details are scarce, the human imagination rushes in to fill the gaps, birthing some of the most resilient fringe theories of the modern era. To figure out what actually sits at the bottom of the world, we need to strip away decades of rumor. We have to take the verified military records and put them head-to-head against the legendary claims at hidden UFOs and secret underground bases. The paper trail starts in 1938. The German government launched a major expedition to the Antarctic coast, officially aiming to secure new whaling grounds and natural resources. They mapped out a massive chunk of territory and formally claimed it as New Swabia. The logistics of this mission were entirely conventional for the era. The crew used standard seaplanes, launching them off the coast to drop metal markers across the unexplored heights. By 1939, the surveying was complete and the ships went home. But after the fall of the Third Reich, a wildly different story took shape. Rumors began circulating that the 1938 expedition was never about whales or basic resources at all. Instead, it was supposedly a cover operation to construct Base 211, a colossal, highly classified underground installation. According to the post-war myth, Base 211 was a subterranean stronghold. Stories described hidden laboratories where Nazi scientists worked on experimental flying disc technology, supposedly powered by ancient, unknown energy systems discovered buried beneath the permafrost. You won't find a single piece of verified evidence proving Base 211 exists. Yet the extreme isolation of New Swabia, paired with the Nazi obsession with experimental wonder weapons, produced a legend that is practically impossible to fully debunk. Then, in 1946, the United States launched Operation Highjump. The sheer scale of this deployment was staggering. We're talking thousands of military personnel, massive aircraft carriers, and warships navigating treacherous waters. The official military explanation was straightforward. Highjump was simply a cold-weather training exercise to prepare troops for potential Arctic combat. Yet, the operation ended abruptly, with the fleet packing up and heading home much earlier than originally planned. That sudden, unexplained departure poured gasoline on the existing rumor mill. Conspiracy theorists immediately argued that Highjump was a live combat mission, intended to hunt down the remnants of Base 211 and secure their advanced technology. And at the dead center of this mythology sits Admiral Richard Byrd, the famous explorer who led the operation. Soon after the mission, a highly controversial story surfaced regarding a specific reconnaissance flight Byrd supposedly took over the ice. The alleged account describes Byrd flying past the frozen wastes and discovering hidden, ice-free valleys. It claims he encountered silent flying craft and was forced to land by an unknown subterranean civilization who gave him a dire warning about humanity's path toward nuclear destruction. The U.S. military never offered a completely transparent explanation for why Highjump was cut short. That classified silence allowed these hollow earth narratives to permanently attach themselves to Byrd's actual documented explorations. Fast forward to the modern era, and the continent is still generating strange reports. Over the decades, governments have officially documented and investigated numerous unexplained atmospheric formations and strange radar anomalies appearing above the ice. But alongside those dry, technical government reports, you have the spectacular accounts from military pilots and ground personnel. They have consistently reported seeing glowing aerial objects and silent flying discs, craft that perfectly match the old Nazi UFO lore. Today, internet sleuths look for proof from orbit. This diagram shows a simplified topographical map of an Antarctic ice shelf, highlighting exactly what these amateur researchers claim to find: perfectly circular anomalies and long, deep trenches that look exactly like crash trails. But the scientific explanation points to the ice itself. As this animation demonstrates, glacial ice is constantly flowing and shifting. Extreme wind erosion and natural fracturing forces create these exact circular shapes and straight linear patterns completely naturally. Even with our modern satellite technology, a shifting ice sheet is inherently visually ambiguous. Because the environment is so remote, almost any geological pattern is immediately interpreted by the public as a crashed craft or a buried base. Antarctica is a complex geopolitical puzzle where decades of intense military secrecy permanently blurred the boundary between scientific reality and science fiction. We have absolutely zero physical proof of subterranean civilizations or hidden wonder weapons. Yet the steady stream of credible military reports detailing unexplained radar tracks and aerial anomalies remains a verified, unresolved footnote in our historical record. To this day, the bottom of the world remains incredibly isolated. It is a strictly controlled environment, and massive stretches of its interior are still entirely unexplored. We have to decide if some of the biggest secrets in human history are actually buried down there beneath the ice, or if our own imaginations are simply rushing in to fill the void of the unknown.